Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to give people a little bit to join in on the chat room. We're going to give people some time. We are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. We are not doing Instagram and TikTok for multiple reasons. But for tonight, we're just going to be streaming with our tribe members that are near and dear to our heart.
That's right.
It's a very special evening, so thank you all for being here.
Why is it really special evening?
Because it is.
Should I say why it's a special evening?
I haven't announced it all day. Feel free.
I mean, do we call it the actual thing?
Can't.
Or we call it a rebirth day? All right.
I like the rebirth part.
You do?
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. All right, welcome to the Tribe of Eden TV True Version Show. We are so glad to be here with you Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we also have our upload to Anchor every Monday evening, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We have a great topic for us. The today topic is going to be somewhat of two parts because I feel like this discussion can lead into more than 1 hour, believe it or not. Even though Walker and I love to talk, the discussion itself, the topic itself, there's a lot to cover and talk about. So we are talking about psychological autopilot, which can be very confusing for some people, but I feel like in our business, we do this a lot.
Sure. And I feel perhaps that the psychological component of it, people think like medical and they think like, studies of the brain and like more of the third dimensional concept of psychology, but so much of how the psyche operates is so much outside of the physical realm. They haven't yet figured out what part of the brain makes the decisions. There isn't a part in the brain that actually clicks and makes a choice and chooses decisions. So they know less about the brain than they know about the entire body. And these are people that study it. So when we talk about psychology or we talk about psychological, we're talking about the psyche. We're talking about the self-image according to how that image was developed by the patterns, the mythical beliefs, the childhood, the development. Everything of how one interacts with their reality is going to be based off of their experience and the beliefs that they've been told. And
so this ties into the whole 3 parts of consciousness that I talked about in the Unveil Your Intuition book that I wrote. If you can imagine being in this dome, we are in a false reality, a 3D world. So that would be representing. What in the holy fuck?
I like that word. New word, representing has been decreed by Walker. Representing. That means that you are overly representing something and it needs to be represented.
Oh my goodness gracious me. That's what I get. Oh,
kind of a dry laugh track, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cancel, clear, delete.
I meant to say it is representing. So the 3D world that we live out in this fake world, in this dome, represents those mythical false beliefs we have stored in the subconscious mind. So if you can imagine a dome that we live in, everything within the dome represents that 3D subconscious thinking. Then we have what's called the veil of the dome, which is where the crack has occurred. That is your conscious mind. This is where you get confused because rationalization starts to kind of creep in and, kind of takes away from the false reality, but yet gets you into the state of almost like an epiphany, like something else. You're going into that sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go past the dome, which is where we all want to be, the 5D consciousness. And that is your superconscious. That is your highest form of connection, the true connection to your higher self, the true connection to source. That is where all the answers lie. So anything below the superconscious, the psyche plays upon. And that is where we end up making these, what I call free will of choice instead of free will of guidance, because a lot of times we're choosing and we're trying to manifest things in our life from a lower vibration, because you can even play it out within the dome 3D, the veil right around the dome 4D, and then anything past it 5D, or subconscious, conscious, superconscious. I hope that resonates and makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And to quote Einstein,
I love Einstein.
Albert Einstein made a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, basically stating that a problem cannot be solved by the same consciousness that started it.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that when we talk about psychological autopilot, when we talk about being in a low vibration, which is fear-based, it's coming from a space of most likely trauma-based fear. However that plays out, that could even be like a deeply subconscious or unconscious fear from another lifetime. The fear of the stock market crashing, the fear of the Great Depression. Like these types of things can have an energy vibration within the collective. So when we talk about psychological autopilot, what we're actually stating is trying to solve a problem by going back into the 3D psychological response, which is just replaying over and over again the same kind of thing to keep one safe or to stay in survival.
And to help you understand a little bit, and we're not here to give you a science and a biology class at all, but I want people to understand that at a cellular level, everyone with a cell has intelligence. Everyone with a cell, your DNA is in there. But trauma and mythical belief systems and things like that can affect the vibration and the frequency and the actual cellular change, the actual aging process just through your psyche. So your mind can actually affect the intelligence within the cell itself. And, we see this play out on a daily basis, which is why the world is the way it is when it comes to big pharma. Everyone wants to treat it as a disease process, and they don't want to get to the root of the problem. And they don't want to help heal from a cellular level, making your cells look like raisins and putting them into a state of looking like a plum. That is all of our goal as human beings that have the cellular intelligence, that has this higher consciousness. You're trying to connect with this intelligence, this higher self of yours, this source. So when it comes to manifesting, a lot of us, and I'm just as much, a culprit of this, because I did this for years. I was trained by spirit to manifest certain things, and I didn't understand what manifesting was. I didn't even know I was doing it. And a matter of fact, I didn't even know I was doing it from a quantum level. This took time. I learned a lot more as I went through my studies, but I couldn't pinpoint the manifesting section because it didn't make sense in any of the, the medical books or, the health books, or none of it made sense to me until I started channeling what it meant to have this spiritual component in every aspect of your cell. That is when things truly started changing for me, and I started shifting the way I perceived things. However, I taught manifesting similar to a lot of the ways many spiritual people teach it. And they use this as Tesla. And I'm going to tell you, if anyone listened to the Tesla channeling in the tribe, because I channel Tesla, then Walker and I together channeled Tesla, and we created a kind of fill in the blank type video within the tribe to explain what 369 truly means. And it really is not what it's taught to be. People think 369 is think about it 3 times, say it 6 times, repeat it or visualize it 9 seconds, whatever the case is. I don't even know it because it just doesn't resonate with me. When we channeled Tesla, what resonated with us is that he was talking about the chakra system of 369, which is 3 is the most important because that's your gut. 6, which represents your third eye, is even more important. Then connecting it all with the 9, which is way above the 8th chakra, that is when you start entering your highest intelligence. So 369 for us, for quantum, is how we do manifesting. But so many people are on this psychological, what Walker would say, autopilot, because they've been conditioned to believe that if you think about it, say it, and visualize it, it's just going to pop up in your fucking life like magic. The magic's within you. It's not outside of you. So thinking and visualizing it, writing it, talking it out is not what's going to make it come to be. It just doesn't work that way. There's a whole vibration and frequency component of that.
So everything within a vibrational frequency holds a formula or a pattern. There is an absolute truth pattern called flow, meaning the path of least resistance is where there is flow. What trauma does, if you look at the flow of this intelligence of a cell, of a dendrite being created, of these neurons connecting with each other and firing, when there is a distortion of the flow, of the truth, of the divine pattern, we'll put it that way, that bounding up of the neurons, it causes them to wire a certain way, and to wire in a bundled manner, or in a way that is in resistance or is looking to avoid that patterning. Because it is wired that way, in a way that is not in the truth alignment.
Or in flow.
That's the entire patterning simply just is. Then it is labeled negative, bad, an experience that one wants to avoid. Because those neurons were wired a certain way, they fire off that certain way. And when they fire off that certain way, they continually create that same pattern. This is how one can be controlled through psychological autopilot. A bad thing happened, bad thing. It just is. It occurred normally at an early age. It creates a trauma, or this bounding up of the fibers of the cells, of the way it's wired. It had to be wired that way because that's the experience it got. The words, the vibration, everything created that space. Then it just continues to happen because it's firing off
and
gets tethered that way, and it's firing off that way. So what the ego does, what the ego system does, is it basically locks away these insecurities that have caused trauma, says those don't exist, it's fine, no big deal. We just won't look at those. So it's a security system that is unwilling to look at anything that causes insecurity in the system, which then hijacks the person and creates a psychological patterning where the person will respond according to how they've been treated or reaction. The the way that this plays out is the person then gets essentially hijacked by their own psychological patterning and is unable to see outside of their belief system, which also solidifies that same belief and recreates that pattern again in their environment. Because they are this victim of their environment and their circumstances, they have no ability to observe or see outside of that because they're in this psychological fear-based patterning. Or
then you add to that, if anyone didn't hear the spiritual narcissism episode on Anchor and Spotify, I suggest you go over and listen to that because it kind of ties into what we're talking about with the autopilot. Because sometimes this behavior that gets kind of tethered in and gets imprinted. I'm very big on imprints because I've been doing imprint work for many, many years, in which I've been trying to remove imprints because people have this kind of unconscious way of imprinting these belief systems. What happens is then you become a spiritual narcissist to yourself and you start controlling things and you start placing yourself, because you're on autopilot, you actually end up putting yourself into these regimens, these strict regimes of trying to do these things and be part of your spiritual side, but be your parent side and be your daughter side or your friend side. And you're trying to manifest all these things into your life. Well, I want more money. I want financial freedom. I want health. I want these things. But in your autopilot, you're not working on the stored trauma. You're just going at it. It's almost like you keep suppressing it because everything in life is taking you in multiple directions. So the stuff gets stored. And as it gets stored, it creates a secondary autopilot, and that autopilot becomes Groundhog Day. Does anyone resonate with fucking Groundhog Day? Where you wake up, you know you want something more for yourself, but you can't seem to make a change. You can't seem to get there. You're getting lost. You're feeling confused because you're on this autopilot where if you're even off this autopilot for 15 minutes, your whole day gets disrupted. So those are awareness. That should be more of an awareness. That should be a sign that something like Walker was saying that has been a trauma stored or some sort of imprint has been so conditioned to play out as a suppression every day in your life that changing your routine actually brings this feeling to the surface and your body goes, I don't know what the fuck to do with this. So the autopilot could be in multiple facets. It could be like Walker was saying, this trauma that happened as a child, or this indoctrination that has happened, or the way you were raised. But as you get older, those patterns, those autopilots start to, almost like an octopus, start to create other tethers around you. You get tethered in a routine. You get tethered in a work routine. You get tethered in a financial routine. And the minute you try to break free of this, your body responds in a very unhealthy way because it gives you fear, panic, anxiety, and you don't know what to do with it. This is the psyche, the subconscious we talked about at the beginning of this video, where your subconscious is so strong that as it starts to get manipulated or shifted or rattled, your ego, which is your conscious mind that wants to rationalize shit, doesn't know what to do with the information, and it's not usually direct guidance. The only direct guidance you get to break free of this this psychological autopilot is to work with your superconscious, to go straight up into your higher self and learn to let go and begin to heal some of these tetherings, these imprints that have been created and placed within your cellular memory since childhood.
I mean, so much of the day-to-day, it's all built out of patterns. One of the main things you can do is observe those patterns. If you always get out of the right side of the bed, or you always sleep on the left side of the bed, or you always brush your teeth in the morning, or you always, go to work the same way or travel. Do something different to see how the psychological mapping is completely affected. Feel what it feels like to break a pattern. Do it one day and see how the brain has to, and the mind has to break a mapping pattern. And it gets uncomfortable because the ego system, people say, oh, you got ego, you got ego. The ego system is not negative or positive. It doesn't hold a vibration of polarity. It simply is designed to keep one safe. The ego is designed for spatial awareness, so we don't jump off of cliffs or run into walls. Those kinds of things, of survival mechanism that it's designed for, is great. However, the mapping or patterning that occurs wires those neurons in a way that continually wants to avoid that situation or that experience. Thus, lock it out, forget it, ignore it, make it disappear, and then try to have an opposite experience. Mm-hmm. It is then when trying to have that opposite experience of that learned behavior, that patterning, the way that those neurons are wired together, it fires off, and then the same type of energy and situation comes into that person's experience. Why? Because it continues to play out patterns of psychological autopilot, and then people think it's called fate. I guess I'm always the one that girls cheat on. I guess I'm the one who's always going to get, used and abused. I guess I'm the one who just can't seem to keep a job. These are all patternings. These are all psychological patternings that keep the person in their script. The way that these neurons are wired is a script. It's transcribed through the DNA. It tells the DNA, well, here's the story. And the story is a bunch of narratives. It's a bunch of words. Words have the most potent energy vibration to change DNA, especially during formative years. When one is completely blank slated coming out of the womb and they're like, well, I guess this is the world. And then someone says, hey, they show them their shoes and they say, these are called cows. Do you know that person will grow up thinking they're cows and be psychologically damaged in society because they've been taught all kinds of different things that are untrue? The malleability of a young mind, of a fresh, brand new avatar or body, it doesn't matter if it has an old soul in it, can get very damaged by telling it untruths. Mm-hmm. And, we'll go to a break here in a minute. But in the next segment, we'll talk about what are untruths. We'll talk about how does one pinpoint these, what Dr. Motherell likes to call mythical beliefs. How much in life do you know is true? I mean, true with a capital T, like you could bank on it. Think about it. When I sat down one day going through an existential crisis, I took out a piece of paper and I titled it, "What Do I Know?" There wasn't hardly anything I could write down, because knowing comes from a space of absolute truth. What Motherella calls inner knowing. Inner knowing is absolute truth because it comes from the spirit ritual, right? Mm-hmm. Connection with the God within, mm-hmm. which is everything that is outside actually connects from in here. Most individuals on psychological autopilot, they get stuck right below the heart. They try and skip that and go up here into the third eye and brain and try to maneuver past the lower vibrational, instinctual energy that is the survival mechanisms that are stored in the lower three chakras, which are how this is all wired. That this is all of these. It takes people away from their inner knowing. It does. and it drops them out of their heart. So much of all of these fears, they're actually bottled up around their heart. So they're not able to go within, because if they start to go within, there's something, some sort of structure or pattern that says, you're not allowed to do that. You need to be beholden to some other authority. Everything that a child experiences as the world, they learn from those who are supposedly older than them and know more than them. They listen to whatever those beliefs are. They structure that off of those words, and then their experience with those words as they move throughout their environment, how they interact with it.
So when we get back from the break, we'll talk more about this inner knowing and how it plays out on autopilot as soon as we get back from the break. This is a really good topic tonight. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
See ya.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tribe of Eden TV True Version Show. We're having a really in-depth discussion prior to the commercial break, but in the first half of the show. So if you missed the first half, please listen to the replay, because we had a lot of great information teaching and understanding what it means to be on psychological autopilot and how that plays out in terms of your manifesting and spirituality, but more importantly, how it can block you from living your best authentic life, from, living out this true soul origination. So this is going to end up being a topic that we discuss not only in this episode, but we'll be carrying over to the next episode.
Can we just discuss alignment for a minute?
Yeah.
Because, there is such a thing as someone being in alignment in 3D, because their consciousness is in 3D, and that's where they're aligned.
Correct.
Misalignment and disalignment comes from the resistance of higher consciousness having an experience outside of the psychological belief systems, mythical belief systems, and then ignoring it. Or continuing to try, like I said in the beginning, solve a problem with the same level of consciousness, mean the same way of doing things under a 3D experience. It happened once and it's repeated over and over again. Why? Because those neurons are wired that way. That's how they fire. Higher consciousness comes from a space of going, these belief systems aren't serving me.
I think people need to understand, though, that alignment doesn't, just because we say we're in alignment, when things aren't working for us, that's also an alignment. We've created, and it's a disalignment, but it's still
it's a disalignment to higher consciousness, but it is an alignment according to the wiring. See, right. The wires are still aligned. That's firing just like it was within a third dimensional space. This is how you can say there is a disalignment of higher soul path and purpose, but there is an alignment of a 3D concept Correct. Of oneself, which is the psychological profile that one considers themselves to be. When they start to think outside of themselves, when they start to go within and feel that there is more to them than just this name and this body and their upbringing and all of these things. I mean, that's one of the checklists I went down is like, am I my name? No. Am I my body? Am I my parents' son? I mean, these are all stories. These are all things that make up essentially a profile, but I exist outside of just a profile. I've lived many lives. I can see into those types of things. It's when one starts to have these types of inner knowing that the truth is stranger than the fiction and the science fiction that we've been given of these avatars.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, because I operate, you've watched me with my inner knowing. It's really hard to shake me.
So it's a great point that you bring up. Disalignment can be also an alignment of a lower consciousness. Mm-hmm. So when people say, well, I was told things by my parents that were bad, were they bad? Were they? Did they work for you at the time? See, this whole thing of bad and good or negative and positive has no vibrational meaning. It all comes down to truth. Truth is the highest vibrational alignment. And any resistance to that will cause disalignment of the soul, which is actually the alignment, right, of the old consciousness or the old belief systems. Mm-hmm. So anytime that there is resistance to joy, there's resistance to happiness, there's resistance to making a decision. Or
there's resistance to trusting your gut, even though the spirit
trusting intuition.
Giving you sign after sign after sign after sign.
Right? And it's time to stop paying tuition to other indoctrination things and start the intuition. Start investing in here. Mm-hmm. Because in here gives all the answers that no person externally can actually give. People say, oh, you're so wise, you know so much. I said, no, I just remember more than you do. That's all. That's all it is. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop. But I mean, I remember more than they have forgotten. They just forgotten that these are the main truth concepts. This isn't about, wisdom is essentially this inner wealth of this inner standing of esoteric knowledge that so many people are looking exoterically. They're outside of themselves looking for all these answers. All the answers are in here, and you hear that and it's so cliche. But they are, because if you look at all the answers that are inside, exactly what you don't want is present as the sandbag in your life of the psychological wiring. This is how you can figure out, oh my God, I am so grateful for having this shitty experience because it's shown me exactly what I don't want, and it's showing me what I'm creating. Mm-hmm. How am I unconsciously creating this? Because if I know and I can pinpoint it, then I can move in a new dislodging and rewiring to have them fire in a different way by observing. So this key point is, when something isn't working out in your life and you go, I feel like I'm out of alignment, that means you're out of your own soul alignment, which means that there's been something mapped and patterned in a way that is in alignment to 3D consciousness. So the main thing that you can ask yourself, the main thing that clears everything up when we start to observe our own patternings is why. Mm-hmm. Why do I do these things? Why do I get up on this side of the bed? Why do I move this way? Why do I believe I have to invest in this? Whose beliefs are these? And without judging the person, regardless of how they acted or how they instilled this lesson, without judging them, say, it's their programming, it's their belief system, it's how their programming works, which allows you to gain an observation of how, oh, that's how their life worked. And when she talks about imprints are very subtle because they're not informed consent, they're implied. So much of a child's experience is all implied consent because they don't know they can opt out. They don't know they can say no. So as a child, we don't know that. We're basically just beholden to whatever the parents have to say or authority figures. But even that's not true. So it's the why that we do things that actually give us a greater insight into who we think we are and be able to create a psychological profile of this avatar playing this script and be able to observe it and say, I see how the body responds according to the wiring, and I see that it gets this result.
And when you try to step out of this autopilot, your body will signal you.
Yes.
Because it's going to come in the form of anxiety and panic.
Something
and
uncomfortable.
and worry, and then questioning, and then almost to the point where it creates this emotional and mental and physical and spiritual debilitation, because you start questioning your own guidance, and your ego loves to keep you unhappy. It really does. So when you start to move out of the psyche autopilot into more of a spiritual autopilot, where you're allowing flow and allowing the universe to take control, and you become, I allow things to play out. When we first met, he was laughing at me because he'd be like, well, what about this? And how does this feel? And I say, I'm waiting for the universe to play it out. I'm not going to answer that today. I'm going to allow some spiritual flow, and I'm going to wait for the universe to show it to me, because my inner knowing is so strong that I already know the outcome. But then I take a step back and I don't create resistance. I wait until the universe aligns it based on what my first original intention is. So when I started stepping out of autopilot, because we've all been there, all of us. I mean, that's why we teach this shit. He's been in it. I've been in it. We've been in psyche autopilot in our lives. But once you break free of those patterns, and you really, when I went through my PhD program, I always talk to you guys, I studied under Dr. Amen. I learned so much about brain health. It was scary. Like things that I didn't even know existed when it came to spirituality and vibration and frequency, and how that really plays out in brain health. Like, it's amazing. And then you have the quantum side, all the quantum studies I've done, and put that all together. It's really, truly amazing how vibration and frequency can really shift your life in an instance. But that autopilot will do everything it can to keep you unhappy. It will do everything it can to feel that, continue that pain. That is what the Matrix is all about as well. It loves to watch it. That's why we're an experiment. It loves seeing us in pain. It loves seeing us unhappy. So getting out of your autopilot, some of the things you may have experienced or are experiencing as we're talking about this, is your job. Do you see yourself in an autopilot situation as your job? You get up, you have your coffee, you get dressed, move, you drop the kids off, you go to school. You have your lunch at exactly the same time, same places, maybe a little bit deviated here. You take a break in the afternoon, you get in the car, you drive home, you pick up, you drop off, you go here, you go home, you go dinner, you clean up, you get ready, watch something, go to bed. Boom, morning, do it again. Or maybe it happens in your love life. You keep attracting in the same shit over and over and over. Feels different only for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it changes or it goes away. So those are some things to be aware of. What are some other autopilots in healing you always say?
Well, I was just thinking about what you were saying and thinking, when did those patterns get broken? They only get broken when people slow down, and that's normally because the body forces them to, because then they get ill, because there's dis-ease that is raising up in that vibration. And I notice, like, most people don't take a break until they're forced to.
Yeah, but it shouldn't take to.
But that's the thing that occurs. Every form of dis-ease is the resistance to flow. So this continuing psychological patterning that's going on is not going in alignment with the soul's path, and thus the body starts to break down. The body starts to resist in that capacity, and then we see someone get ill, and someone's like, "Oh, I was diagnosed with this or that or whatever." It's like that is created from that space of this vibrational trauma that says there is no such thing as unconditional love. There are all these conditions to how you must operate within the environment. And so much, and I'm gonna even say that the ego doesn't want to keep us unhappy. The ego simply it doesn't want to look at insecurities. It wants everything to be secure. It doesn't consider our happiness as its happiness. What it considers is safety and security can make you comfortably miserable, because that is what it's programmed to do under those neurons.
Miserable makes you unhappy.
But it's not about making you unhappy. It simply is. The ego simply is protecting, according to the experiences, what it believes to be self-preservation. And it's not self-preservation of you or your body. It is self-preservation of ego, as if it were an artificial intelligence within itself.
It sort of is.
It doesn't give a shit about your happiness. It doesn't care. It only cares about its own self-preservation. It could give a flying fuck whether you're happy or sad or mad or whatever. It only knows according to what the wiring is. And that is how it is fiercely protective and in self-preservation. So when you were talking about the anxiety and the things of going outside of this psychological autopilot, it is like having a small death of a former self. These belief systems have to come to a surface of where it's so uncomfortable that if this belief isn't true, it destroys the very fabric of what the person thinks they are. Like I see individuals that they don't have a lot of anything other than wealth, right? They have money.
That's all they're driven by.
And they have status of some kind because of their wealth. What would happen overnight
if that was all taken
away from them? What kind of psychological existential crisis would occur because so much of what they do for a living or so much of what they've built their life upon is suddenly gone? That would be, we've seen it remember when there was that crash in 2008 and there was these CEOs jumping out of their windows and stuff? Yeah. That level, if you think of it from that standpoint of survival, if it's coming to a point where a belief system outside of that is, what if there wasn't a need for a fight? What if I didn't have to fight for what I wanted? What if I didn't have to constantly battle my own, what people call demons, right? Which are just essentially these old belief systems that keep patterning, even though the person's healed from the trauma they feel that they have. There's that psychological profile that keeps churning out those same patterns. And it comes to a point where that uncomfortability is at a boiling point.
But I know a lot of wealthy people who have inner wealth as well. They have, and they're.
I'm not saying that it's one without the other. It's mutually exclusive.
And the reason why they're wealthy is because they have such a dedicated self-love experience and self-care experience that they're not going to allow anything other than self-love and self-care first. And then that outer wealth mirrors their inner wealth. So
I'm talking about super money. There's nobody in this dome that has super money.
I see.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Because you really have to know how to jump these timelines and time travel to get around it to be super wealth. And they're not even the wealthiest, but they are super wealth. Mm-hmm. The super wealth that occurs is done by playing this psychological game and giving away so much of one's own allegiance and belief systems to a system that says they will make them wealthy, but it's all just a manipulation of energy. We can get into that another time. Mm-hmm. But yes, there are people that are what you would consider wealthy that have inner wealth. And we teach that outer abundance comes from inner wealth, but outer abundance as inner wealth is everything. It's not just money. It's good, healthy relationships. It is a vibrational fifth dimensional alignment of co-creation instead of codependence to continue that 3D psychological profile to then be codependent on other people to basically be that script, be the script that one has been given.
So how are we going to tell everybody who's listening what steps to take out of it?
The first observance.
I already gave my.
The first observation is why. Why? What? Okay, I do something out of autopilot, and then I look and go, why did I just do that? Where was I told that that's what I had to do? Where did this belief system come from? Whose belief system is it? Is it mine? Did I ever consent to it? That's one thing most people don't realize is, did I ever consent to this belief system? Wow, this sounds just like my father. Did I consent to that? No. I was just told that's the way the world worked, and then I went on believing that's the way the world worked and never realized that that's not my belief, that's someone else's.
With children. We see this a
all
lot
the
with
time.
kids. I do a lot of readings for a lot of college kids. I don't know how this happened all these years, but a lot of college kids find me and they have a lot of questions outside the parental system because now they're over 18 and they want to live their life and they want to do these great experiences for themselves, but their parents are shoving their own projection of what they want them to be down their throat. So here we go with psychological autopilot, where we've now indoctrinated the children to begin with. And then as soon as the kids want to break free from the autopilot and do something outside of that autopilot mode, suddenly it's not right, or suddenly it's wrong, or suddenly you're foolish, or you're going to fail. And that's not how society works, and not all of those things. That's one of the things I have always sort of, and I very rarely pat my back for myself on anything, very rarely. But one of the things I will always pat my back on is that every decision I've made, I didn't give a shit what other people tried to tell me to do. If I would have taken it, maybe 3 of the things of what people wanted from me, I would never be where I'm at today. There's no way. I lived in a small period of time on autopilot. And the reason why I had to do that is because I was a single mom trying so hard to survive that I fell into the entrapment of autopilot. And I'm telling you, it was a very miserable place for me.
Psychological.
It was very miserable for me. I didn't feel myself. In fact, I lost myself during that time. I stopped connecting with spirit during that time because I was living this I've never done that. I was always kind of this free bird doing what I wanted, didn't really give a fuck. Am I a little bit routine oriented? Yes, because I love to work out and I love to have financial freedom. I love to travel. So there's certain things in my daily routine that I would keep kind of stringent on. But even that type of strict regimen created some sort of a psychological autopilot for me that when I tried to get off of it, my day went fucking haywire. The good part about regimens is that it keeps you with self-care and self-love. So when you lose those regimens are very different than autopilot. So we should probably be clear about that. You can have regimens, you can have routines that are not on autopilot.
And we'll get into something called spiritual autopilot, which is a little different. The patterns and mapping is done on autopilot as if someone is controlling your body and you're just kind of moving through the fog. That is when someone is coming into that expression. One thing that I'll state when coming into that observation and awareness is a decision made out of self-love will never, ever be a decision that denies someone else their own self-love, right? It's simply setting a boundary.
Self-love is not, it will take you out of, I believe, this is just my opinion, autopilot.
That's what I'm saying. When people think, oh, I'm being selfish, if it is a decision that is being made that benefits you, but it's something that could benefit someone else by them not practicing self-love, by their dependence on you to do something, know that a decision made in self-love never ever denies anyone their own ability for self-love. It simply sets a standard and a boundary for you to maintain your own self-care.
And allow them to maintain their own. So that's kind of saying,
and that takes them
you have the right to
off their script.
Self-love.
You're taking yourself off your psychological autopilot script, and then they don't know what to do. So they want you to stay doing the same script not because they don't like who you are. They don't like who they are when you're not that codependent pattern. That's the only reason they're around, is because your patterns match. As soon as your patterns don't match, they're going to tell you to change. They don't want to change. They like the way things were because they're on psychological autopilot. When you're aware and you are practicing self-love, you're taking yourself out of there, and then they will be mad at you. This is where that anxiety of, oh my God, what are other people going to think of me? Are you doing something to take away their own self-love, or are you doing something for your own self-love? There's a difference. Being selfish is doing something that might hurt someone else because you want to do you. Self-love is when you do something for you that it really doesn't affect anybody else other than they want you to behave a certain way. You're hurting me. How? Because you're practicing self. You're not taking any opportunities away from them. You're simply calling back your own self-love, your own self-presence.
And you're co-creating with your higher self in your universe when you're doing and you're practicing in that way.
So that breaks the autopilot, because there's the why. Why do I react that way? And we see this.
And it creates awareness, which is really a powerful step into breaking free permanently out of these patterns.
And when you're in that observational pattern, you see everyone else as a mirror. In fact, you'll see people and you'll go, God, I was just like them. I've seen people at dinner parties and things, they say things that come out of their fucking mouth that I've heard on a news station. They just parrot and repeat things and they don't even know they're doing it. And they say, oh, well, you know, this and this and that. That's fact? Really? Someone else told you that mythical belief and you believed it because you heard it somewhere on media? And I see them completely unaware. They're completely unaware of what they just said. And they were like, well, it was from Fox. I don't give a fuck. It was from CNN. I don't give a fuck. It's a closed information center. See, when we talk about people and we talk about critical thinking, we teach people how to think for themselves. Thinking for oneself means that you're critical of your own beliefs. That's how you think for yourself. So when someone else parrots something that they heard, you don't just go parroting around, or you don't fight them simply because it goes against your belief system. There's a critical thinking that goes in there that says, how does this serve me? Not is it negative, is it positive? How does this serve me? Because many things that were negative served in a certain manner in alignment within psychological autopilot, in the consciousness and awareness that was there.
And this is how we move into spiritual autopilot, which is going to be part of the next episode. I don't want to keep going on this because we have to walk them into what it means to step into spiritual autopilot at the end of this show.
You're the boss.
Sorry, our show's over. It's already been an hour. Again, we didn't get to take questions, but the announcements are, if you want to join the Tribe of Eden, please do so at vimeo.com/ondemand/Tribe of Eden. And we will continue this topic on Monday's show, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please follow us on Anchor and Spotify. And for those who didn't catch the little hint, it was my birthday today. My rebirthday. I'm not celebrating, but thank you for sharing tonight with me.
Rebirth day. She's 1 year old.
Yeah, stop it.
Brand new. Just fell off the cabbage truck.
So anyway, I didn't want to announce it in terms of getting all these happy birthday messages, but more of a point that it's a rebirth. We can all rebirth. We can all get out of this psychological
So she made it to this ripe old age of psychological autopilot and then had a rebirth of spiritual autopilot. And that's what we'll talk about in the next episode.
Yep.
We also have a dual channeled reading, do we not?
Oh, that's right.
One-on-one.
Yes. Finally, we can officially announce it. We have the hashtag Power Couple duality reading. It's on discount for all Tribe members. If you're a paying monthly member, it's a discounted rate. Go into the bonus video and get your passcode to get the discounted rate. If not, everyone else go to avatararmory.com and go to the book online section, and it's in there, and you get the both of us.
The website is found right in the Tribe of Eden, right in the trailer in the beginning, and the password is found in bonus 1 video when you're a member.
Yes, and it's going to be so much fun. We're so excited to do this for you. So
it's a one-on-one over a video, and we answer those questions within those 15 minutes.
All right.
All right. We love you.
Thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Talk soon.